All right, guys and girls, yield is a big word in commercial. We're going to take you in the ins and outs of the word yield, how it can make you money if you know how to work your yield. Stay tuned.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 1520. Rental yield, one of the most powerful and most common words in commercial property. Let's talk about it, myself and Mark Novak. When it comes to rental yield, it's such a common word in the commercial industry, and I always take for granted really the knowledge of that. You just, because it's so commonly used, you just think everyone knows what it means. Everybody knows the variations of rental yield and the terms used. Like there's gross yield, there's net yield, and then there's little offshoots from that where you hear net yield and net yield, which is a lot in leasing. But formally, it's gross yield, rental yield, because in the residential market, purchasers, I don't think I've really been asked what the rental yield is of a property. Of course, I've been
Never.
asked what the rental weekly rent is, but they
Yeah.
never look at it from a yield point of view. So, Mark, what is rental yield and why is it so commonly used in commercial?
Look, I think the the reason you're getting into a commercial property is twofold. While the one is an investment, or two, it's an owner occupied. So, I would suggest that probably more half. It's probably half half. Would you say half are rented in commercial and half are owner occupied,
I think
or more?
overall it's probably half. If you broke it up into sections like warehouses, offices, and retail, like you could
Yeah,
say retail purchases are 70% investors,
yeah.
warehouse purchases are 70% owner occupiers, but overall half.
Yep. So when you are the half of, you're going to rent it out to someone, you're relying on rent, and the amount of rent that's coming in on that property or can come in on that property is a super important figure, more than residential. So the guys in the residential aren't really, they will consider other things like a view. But in commercial, it really does come down to a lot of that all gets encompassed into that rent. So yield it's an equation, and it's the rent for the year in the property over the value of the property and the percentage that generates, and that would be the percentage yield on the property.
And I think a good thing to also, the key differences there is a lot of people buy residential properties for capital growth. You rarely hear people say, I'm buying this house because the cash return is so big, I'm going to be making an extra $50 a week. That's typically not the dynamics of a residential purchase. However, when your typical investor starts buying commercial property, and typically they've gotten one or two or three residential properties, very equity rich, very cash poor, they're now looking for an asset class which tends to have a higher yield, i.e., rent over mortgage, as well, rent over value, but it's got the difference between the rental income compared to your mortgage payments. And you may say, well, my mortgage payment is $500 a week, but my rent is $1,000 a week. I'm positive $500 a week. Capital growth tends to be a little bit lighter in commercial because you're getting that stronger cash flow, and that's sort of the principal differences why the word doesn't come up as often in both.
Yeah, and I think that people don't realize when they start investing that there is a relationship between capital growth is the value going up, and yield is that what you're getting out of it every year, every day, every week. The importance of yield becomes more apparent as people get older, because they can't spend all of that equity in the property, and they can spend that rental yield. So there's sort of like a crossroads,
Mm.
all that people get to in their probably 40s and 50s, where they turn around going, man, I've bought a couple of properties along the way, but just even looking at my own home, and like there's a shit ton of equity there, and I can't spend it. And they look at their working career as well changing potentially in 10 or 20 years, and they're like, I really need to have some money to spend when I slow down with work. So yield becomes more important again. So it's a yield is, I find, it's for someone in their 20s, it's not a heavily used word, and then for someone in their 60s or 50s, it's actually thrown around a lot more.
Yeah, and I think it could be used in a residential a lot more because it is an important factor. Like, I think an easy way to look at it, let's say if you're getting a loan for 100% of the value, if you're getting an interest rate at 5% and the rental return is 3%, you know you're going to have to input 2% of that value. But there's a
Yeah,
lot of times a residential purchaser will look at a unit, for example, they look at the view, they look at the paint color, and there could be a big difference in that yield, which could be a deciding factor if they knew what to look for. So,
yep.
as much as it's a lot more common in commercial, it could still be used as a help, an indicator if that residential unit is good value as well.
And if you drive that yield up, i.e., you get more rent for the property or more return on that asset, it's directly indexed to your sales price in commercial. That doesn't happen in residential. So allow me to give you an example. If I have buy a one bedroom apartment in DY for 700 grand and it's rented for 500 a week, and I rent it for 700 a week, it doesn't change the value of that one bedroom unit. But
No.
if you do it in a commercial property, if you go buy an office for $500,000 and it's rented for 300 a week, and you get that office rented for 800 a week on a long lease, the value skyrockets on that asset. So
I have a
it's interesting.
a great example was Howard Avenue, shop 1 to 7. It was vacant. Owners were about to do a deal selling it to an owner occupier for 700,000.
Yeah,
Parallel to that agreement, I had a tenant who was very eager to lease the shop. The owners only wanted to sell, but I ran through the numbers with them and explained if we can secure this tenant will be able to sell at a higher price. So let's just say week one, 700 grand. 2 weeks later, after the lease had been signed to a new purchaser and investor, I sold it for 910,000. That's 210,000 in equity capital growth with just the difference of having the
that's
tenant. Now,
nuts.
I know. And that's why I love commercial property because regardless of the market, you can still heavily impact the price positively or negatively by the
Touchdown.
tenant selection and how you negotiate it. So
Yeah,
that's very, very important. And obviously in reverse, I've seen it go wrong where someone's bought a property with a tenant in place for say 900,000. They've lost the tenant. They've tried to sell it vacant. Selling an asset vacant and tenanted is like selling apples and oranges. They're two very different campaigns, and you've got to understand a lot of people who buy
mm,
commercial property, say under 2 million, under 1.5 million, is really your superannuation purchaser, and the
yep.
banks are very strict to have it tenanted. So you tend to see
Whoa,
a
that's a
lot of
good point.
competition. Yeah,
That's a
you
good
tend
point. You won't get the loan.
you won't get the loan.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
as much as I say to when investors say to me like, what's the best, what's a great buying sort of dynamic or strategy, I sort of advise. Obviously each everyone's situation is different, but a great strategy
yeah,
I see done really well is buy if you were going to buy for 600,000, buy for 300,000, but buy a vacant property, get a good
yep,
tenant. Even if you offer them more rent free to get a higher rent to make
yeah.
that yield look higher, because the
Shape your
easiest
in.
way. Because I say to some owners when we're negotiating pricing, I'm just doing one in Narrabeen, we're putting a tenant in and then we're selling it. I said to the owner, we'll give him an extra month rent free, and there was a bit of pushback. But I said every $1,000 in higher rent is 100,000 on sale price, or
Yep,
80,000 on sale price, and then it made
yep.
it a lot easier to give that little bit of rent free. Um,
Yeah,
so
it's massive. It's
it's
massive.
important to have that agent understand.
So very quickly before we go, can you break down for me net yield, triple net yield, quadruple net yield? How does that work? So there's because in that
Okay.
because there's net. net.
Yeah.
Which is like your, I guess your airports or service stations or big, supermarkets and stuff will have, a triple net yield. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so you start with a gross yield and a net yield. A gross yield is the total income of the property divided by the price. So let's say the income's 100,000, the price is a million. That's a
Yeah.
10% yield,
Yeah.
gross, because we
Right.
all know there's costs
GST?
associated with owning a property. So of that 100,000 income, the owner may have to pay council rates or strata worth $10,000. So to
Okay.
get a net yield is what's the real money in your pocket after all the expenses. It's like a business that says, I've got 2 million revenue. It's like, yeah, but what's your take home? There's no point having 2 million revenue if you still lose money or you're
Yes.
only making 1%. So
Yes.
gross is that type of talk. Now, a lot of your real savvy investors just cut straight to it. What's the net? What's the real net? Because you could say that term has been bastardized.
Yeah.
Typically, the net yield is the income minus all outgoings. So that's from agent fees, council, strata, land tax, everything. But what you tend to see, because a lot of the time a tenant won't pay 100% of the outgoings, they may pay one or two parts of outgoings like council rates or strata. So someone may say, "Oh, the net yield is 90,000," but that doesn't include the deduction of land tax. That doesn't include the deduction of, say, agent management fees. So
Yes. There could be
what's
four or
happened?
five of those things.
Correct. What's happened in the industry, when you hear what's the net yield, that's minus council, water, and strata. And then when someone goes, oh, it's a net, or say a double net yield, that may have building insurance, bins, fire
Land tax.
safety. That's more than triple net yield. So then, or yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes land tax, yes. And then when you hear like the triple net yield, which is actually someone saying all outgoings are paid, that includes your agent fees and your land tax. So
Property maintenance.
yeah,
The
it's been
owner will
agents over,
not put their owner will not put their hand in their pocket for a cent for that asset,
and
except for injury.
it can be a big difference. Like take that
Yeah.
income of 100,000, the
Yeah.
true net yield could be 70,000. So here
Yeah.
you are seeing 10% yield, great, you buy it, but then you forget all
Yeah.
the outgoings and it's really 7%. And if you're borrowing
Yeah.
money at 10 or 9%, for example,
That
then
is.
you haven't got a positively geared property. So it's
Yeah.
very important when you're looking at commercial property to the terms I see people make a lot of errors with, they don't clarify, and sometimes agents do it intentionally to make you ask if you don't pick it up. Is that plus GST or including GST? Because
Yep.
just trying to be tricky with the GST can add 10%. Instead of the rent being 50, you say it's 55 and then you're silent. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
is that including or plus? Because you don't get that money. And
You've got to
then
be a
you've got
bit
to
of a
ask,
ninja as a buyer and a tenant and a landlord and a seller and an agent. You've got to be a ninja with when you're working out yields and stuff,
right?
or net incomes. You've got to be super clever.
Yeah.
Happy
So
days.
that
Thank you. Hopefully we helped everyone out there today. That was a yield session, yield stack.
yield. Love that
There you
word.
go. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you,
Burgio.
everyone. Cheers,
Love the
man. Bye.
passion. Love the passion. It's so passionate.
Yeah. It's Friday. Let's go.
Friday. Passion Friday. See ya.